Let's unbox the latest version of the Titan Hero Series 12-inch Stormtrooper figure by Hasbro.
Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it.
Hello there, thanks for visiting Villa Varykino. We were out at our local mall this afternoon on the hunt for Star Wars toys as usual, and we came across the most recent wave of the Titan Hero Series 12-inch scale figures by Hasbro. For us here in New Zealand, the wave includes 3 characters, all bad guys: Darth, Maul, Darth Vader, and the iconic Stormtroopers. So we are big Stormtrooper fans in this house. My husband and I both have Stormtrooper armor, and we love to add Stormtrooper items to our collection of all sizes. So I know that this particular figure has been released in a number of different packages over the years, but for us here in New Zealand, it's always been really hard to find. The Empire seems to be very popular in New Zealand with fans of all ages buying this figure up. So we were really excited to finally get our hands on this one. So I really am keen to get him out of the packaging, check out the details, and add him to our Stormtrooper collection. It's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll get the figure out. We'll go over all of the details and what articulation might be here as well. But first, let's take a quick look at the packaging. The Titan Hero Series Stormtrooper figure comes in a cardboard box with a clear plastic hanger attached at the top, and rather than having a clear plastic window, it has a cutout so you can actually reach in, see the figure, and even touch it. We've got one large 12-inch scale Stormtrooper figure and one blaster rifle accessory, which we can see is attached to the cardboard tray to the side there. And we also have the Star Wars logo and a nice piece of artwork there of the Stormtrooper down the front. Of course, we've got the character name, simply reads Stormtrooper, along with the Disney and Hasbro logos there. On the left-hand side, we've got really nice artwork of an iconic Stormtrooper there. We can see the blaster rifle in the trooper's hands, and it fades out to just show the Disney logo there at the bottom. On the other side, we have an image of the figure itself there posed with the blaster rifle in the left hand, the character name, and it mentions that it includes figure and accessory there. Moving on to the back, we've got again more artwork of a Stormtrooper. We even have a little bit of a blurb, which I'll quickly read. Stormtroopers are elite shock troops, fanatically loyal to the Empire and the Imperial cause. If that sounds familiar, that is because that's exactly the same blurb on the back of the Epic Hero 4-inch scale figures, also by Hasbro. You can see here, this is the price tag for us here in New Zealand. We can see that it says Star Wars Titan Hero Series, even though that title isn't actually on the packaging anywhere else, just on the sticker there. Retails in New Zealand for 22 New Zealand dollars, but as I mentioned, we picked this one up on sale, so it's about half the price of a vintage collection figure, which I think is pretty good value for money. It says that small parts may be generated as a warning so that you don't break it, and of course the rest of it is barcode, copyright, all of that kind of stuff. So very simple packaging, but I like the strong black and white colors. Works really well for the Stormtrooper. And I do like the fact that we've got a little touch of color here with these blue stripes behind that picture of the figure, which is echoed in the tray on the inside. You can see that same blue stripe pattern there. But I bought this one to open, so let's get stuck in and get them out of the packaging. I normally open up all of my Star Wars figures from the underside to try and keep the packaging as nice as I can, but this one has a folded bottom. It's not really designed to be opened there. It opens from the top. It is sellotaped up. I've just quickly snipped through the tape so I can open this up straight away. And we can see that we've got a cardboard tray to pull out, and then we can get going on cutting all of the fastenings there. So can see the figure in his cardboard tray nicely attached, and we've got a whole lot of those clear sort of ties holding him in place. So I'm just going to quickly snipple those fastenings off so we can take a proper look and get him into some poses. So now I have the Stormtrooper and his blaster rifle accessory completely out of the packaging so we can go over the details. So of course we all know the iconic Stormtrooper quite well by now. He's been made in so many different formats across so many decades, but it's really fun to see it's still selling well on the toy store shelf. So let's go over the details. Of course, he's all white, pretty much, all made from white plastic with a few small exceptions. The hands are made out of a black plastic with the back of the hand armor pieces being painted white. So under certain lights, you can kind of see the fact that the white is different to the white of the plastic that most of the pieces are used, but it is pretty well done. We've just got that little bit of a paint line edge there that just kind of draws the eye a little bit, but overall not too bad. So it does have slightly simple construction because he's mostly hollow with a bit of internal structure, so you get some seam lines that you can sort of notice in a few places. The ones that are sort of standing out to me are on the knee. You can kind of see the seam line on the front of the foot there, but where it really counts in terms of some of the main focus details up here looks really good, like the helmet. So of course, let's start off with the helmet details. So some of the other sort of budget toy lines by Hasbro, when it comes to the Stormtroopers, they kind of tend to skimp a lot of the details because there's a lot of complexity to a Stormtrooper helmet. So of course, it's all white. We have the black brow trim. We have dark lenses, the color of which can vary depending on which film and which character you're specifically looking at. Sometimes they're green, sometimes they're more of a black or dark brown. We've got the sort of teardrop cheek details. We've got the details around the top of the helmet here. We've got the cheek stripes, the grill, and the details around the chin here. So I can already see some that are good and are really nice to see, and some that are missing or perhaps done a little bit wrong. I like the brow trim there. You can kind of see where it technically overlaps in terms of the printing that they do, just overlaps here in the center. I always kind of wish that these ones were straight, but for a cheap toy, that's not too bad. I've certainly seen worse when it comes to overlining that sort of detail there. Now these details, the sort of sunken in details around the top of the helmet, these should be gray. So these ones here in the back are simply not painted at all, and these ones on the front are painted black, which is kind of a little bit interesting. I think they're just trying to cut down on the sheer number of colors they were using to paint the figure. Likewise with the cheek details, these should be gray with some stripe details. I do like the fact that the blue cheek stripes are here because that is a detail that is very, very often dropped off Stormtroopers because it's such a small printing detail, and it's nice to see that here. Stormtrooper helmets they look a little bit off when they don't have this detail, though of course there was one on screen that doesn't actually have it, so I guess you can always assume that perhaps it's that one specific Stormtrooper, but I do like the fact that we've got nice tidy printing here. When I'm looking at it dead straight on, the blue stripes on this side are just a little bit thicker than the blue stripes on this side. Not so much that it looks lopsided, but when I'm doing a really close-up comparison, they're just a little bit different there. We do have a nice two-tone color paint scheme here for the grill. There is one tooth that is just a little bit paler than the rest, but it looks pretty good. We've got the black chin detail, though we don't have any paint apps here on the other details on either side. You could paint that black or perhaps gray if you like. And of course, we don't have those details on the back of the helmet. Now, moving on, most of the black details are on the front. We can see here sort of at the upper arm, the elbow, and we've got the black gloves. When I turn it around, that black paint does not continue on, which is kind of a little bit interesting. You can see here, we've got black at the front and it does not continue on, which is a bit of a shame. Also here at the sort of upper arms there, no black neck seal. This part here is not white armor. This is a black undersuit, so that should be black as well. Now the rest of the back here, we've got all of that nice segmented armor matching up nicely. Depending on how the Stormtrooper armor fits, sometimes you get a little bit of black showing down in sections here where the armor doesn't quite meet. But here, of course, as the toy, it meets up very nicely or perfectly there. But the thermal detonator on the back does not have any painted details. They usually have a little bit of a black and gray on the thermal detonator there. And you can see it's not really a separate piece there. It's sculpted on. Of course, we don't want to be having a choking hazard, a removable parts on a large toy like this. And we should have black where the undersuit is showing from the white armor. So we would have black through here and around to the back, also at the knees here, and we don't generally see the undersuit around the ankles, so we're all fine there. But sometimes the armor just looks a little bit odd when we just have those white clean boots there with no black here. It's just kind of all looking rather white there. So for the price point, I can understand why Hasbro would sort of skip over some of the fine details when it comes to the paint apps. But if you're looking for a sort of a cheap starting point, it wouldn't be too hard to get a small craft brush and some black paint and just carefully paint in those detail lines. Black's pretty easy to work with, nice defined lines. You can sort of accurize it. The tricky part here would be up into the hips at the top of the legs there and getting in up around the helmet for that sort of neck seal section there, but not impossible. Also, the other part is I generally find almost none of the cheap Stormtrooper toys have any paint application on the abdomen section here. Some of these sort of quote-unquote buttons, they're not really buttons, but the sort of, we call them buttons, on the ab plate here have different colors depending on which film you're watching. Some are black, gray, blue. Those details here are not painted, but they're nicely sculpted, I have to say. It's nice to see. And something else about that's sort of grabbing my attention just while I'm sort of looking at the abdomen section here, we've got a really nice belt. It's perhaps sitting up a little high because we can see a little bit more of that codpiece coming round to the hips, but the drop boxes, those little rectangles that hang down from the front, on a lot of Stormtrooper toys, they tend to hang towards the front of the thigh, generally around here. On this particular sculpting, they are included here on the side. So when I use the articulation there, they just kind of rotate around. Oftentimes they're on the front and they just kind of swing up. They're generally not attached unless you get more of these sort of more expensive toys like the Vintage Collection or Black Series. So just a little bit odd that they chose to sculpt that there, because on the other cheaper toys it is still sculpted on the front, and it just kind of, it almost looks like it's missing with that detail and not on the front of the thigh. But in terms of the actual sort of accuracy of the Stormtrooper, I think it's fairly well proportioned. I know his stance is perhaps a little bit drawn in because he's kind of tight. His arms are very close to the body, kind of straight. His shoulders look rather sort of narrow for the proportions of the helmet, but it just kind of gives the the overall of, he's just a little bit of a skinnier, tall, sort of slightly lanky Stormtrooper there, rather than sort of one that's been sort of a bit sort of working out and a bit sort of more muscular in its physique. So overall, I think the proportions are not too bad, especially when we consider that some of the original Kenner Stormtroopers and Imperials kind of had that sort of really hunched expression, you know, with sort of no necks, where the helmets were sort of sculpted down. I think the proportions are quite good. The one thing that's kind of throwing my eye a little bit is I think the boots are quite short. It looks like he's got very small boots for the actual height of the character here. I feel like perhaps it'd be a little bit longer for the height of the Stormtrooper, but overall, in terms of the details and the sculpting, I think he looks really good. Nothing's really sort of drawing my eye in a really negative way, especially that helmet. Really, really good. I think if you're a Star Wars fan and you've been collecting Stormtrooper toys over the years, it really, really draws my eye if the Stormtrooper helmets are wrong, if there's something misproportioned about them, the eyes aren't right or something like that. I was very glad when Funko changed their Stormtrooper design for the helmets. They originally had that circle, as most Funkos do, and they've modernly changed them into the more of the sort of teardrop shape for the eyes, and that just looks so much better in my opinion, but that's Funko. So let's just quickly go over the articulation here. So of course we can turn the helmet so he can check out the perimeter. He has one mode of articulation for his arms, just up and down at the shoulders there. It does hit the helmet, so he's not going to be raising his arm up all the way, and turning the helmet doesn't really help us there. It's just completely hitting, but we do have articulation at the wrist, so that does help a lot. So he's not just going to be raising his arm up and down in terms of putting the blaster rifle accessory. Also, when I raise his arm up, you can see where the paint stops from the front to the back. It's just sort of tucked in there a little bit. Same on the other side. I can raise that arm up, but we're hitting the helmet, and this hand also articulates around at the wrist. So you can see the hands. We've got a sort of a classic action figure grip on both hands. So I'm hoping he will be able to hold his E11 blaster rifle in either hand, depending on the pose that you want to do. And of course, he does articulate at the hips. Very nice. That is the only articulation point for the legs. Nothing at the knees or at the ankles. So he does stand up nice and sturdily, because he is a tall figure and he's got nice flat feet. He is very sturdy. So if this is for a younger fan, it's going to be very easy to play with, stand and sort of hold accessories. The one thing that I think older fans will perhaps be a little bit disappointed is the lack of articulation in the elbows more than the legs. A lot of Stormtroopers have this kind of just nice sort of Stormtrooper stance. The legs aren't too straight. They do sort of widen out, which I feel looks more natural. But because the arms can't move in together, we can't get a two-handed blaster rifle grip. He's just going to sort of be holding it and pointing it in one plane, which is a little unfortunate. But yeah, so he's not going to kind of get a classic sort of two-handed Stormtrooper pose there. So let's quickly check out the accessory that came in there. It was safely sort of connected in there, so it wasn't going to get lost. There is a little bit of a flex to this. It's not brittle. I think I'd have to really wrench that to try and snap it, so that's good. Lots of durability there. We do have a lot of surface detail here. It's made out of black plastic, so the detail is a little bit hard to see. It is all black. We don't have any kind of erased details in terms of like the gaps around things. Everything's kind of all solid. We don't have a trigger guard or anything like that. We've just got this singular grip there. It's recognizably a Stormtrooper blaster rifle. May not be the most accurate, but it's going to do the job. Very nice. Okay, so let's quickly test it in both hands. So sometimes when they can move their hands around, it does mean that it's a little bit hard to get things in, but with a bit of a push, he holds onto it, and I feel like that grip is nice and solid. He is not going to drop that. It's not going to sort of fling out of his hand. If I was going to knock that against another toy, if they're sort of having space battles, that might pull out of his hand under a bit of tension, but that is a really solid grip because we don't have an extended trigger finger or a trigger guard. It's nice and easy to get in and out, and that's a very sturdy grip. So of course we can rotate his hand, but he's still going to sort of hold it in just that one plane. So if we're going to be aiming at a rebel, he's just going to be sort of holding it straight up. But for younger fans, that's about all you really need. And he does look pretty cool, and it doesn't look the worst if he's just going to sort of stand here like this, holding onto his blaster rifle. It doesn't look too awkward. And I think it'd be pretty cool if you want to sort of army build and have a couple lined up just for a bit of a display. Just much more affordable than doing it with other manufacturers of 12-inch figures. You can certainly buy a lot more of this Hasbro figure than you could, say, a Sideshow or Hot Toys 12-inch figure. So I can see the appeal for fans. So let's quickly test this in his left hand, just pushing in there. And again, yep, nice sturdy grip there. And yeah, I think I like Stormtrooper blaster rifles in their right hand. To me, it looks a little bit more proper, but then I am right-handed. So I do like that he can fit it in both hands, depending on which is your preference. He doesn't have a holster or anything like that. So if you want to have him displayed with his accessory, he's going to be holding it there. So there, he's pretty cool, actually. I've been wanting one of these for a while. I know I do own a lot of sort of more, so we say, higher quality in terms of detail when it comes to Stormtrooper items, but sometimes just big is just fun. It just sort of, has a bit of a presence. You can see it from the other side of the room, and sometimes you just want some fun things to sort of decorate your living space. Something like this you can put in a kitchen or a bathroom because it is simple. It's got a lot of weight, so I'm not sure that I'd necessarily put it near sunlight in case he yellows over time. We know that is always an issue with Stormtrooper figures, but he's just so big and cool, and a really affordable price point for younger fans that want to have some cool Star Wars stuff in their bedroom. I think it looks really cool. So happy that I was actually finally able to find this one. I really wanted to have just a big fun Stormtrooper in my collection, and I think he looks really cool. Now for us locally, there was only 2 of him on the store shelf. We picked up one, so they're going to go fast. I guarantee it, considering how hard it was to ever find the earlier versions of this figure. So I was just so excited to finally find one. It has its flaws in terms of looking at this as an adult collector. We're missing a lot of paint and the articulation's not fully there, but it's very durable. I can wave him around because I'm not really worrying about bending his knees or anything like that. And he's just going to stand up really sturdy, which is just, sometimes that's all you really want. Some figures are just so prone to falling over. When they're bigger, you really don't want them falling over because then that starts to get really risky amongst your other Star Wars collectibles. So I like the fact that he's sturdy. He looks cool. We've got a lot of neat paint details there for the helmet, so that's looking really neat. And of course, because he's facing forward, I'm probably not going to really notice the fact that there isn't any of that black undersuit painting down the rest of the back of the body there. So for the price I paid, I could buy about 2 of these for the same price as a vintage collection 3.75-inch figure, and he looks really cool. And you know what? If I find another one, I might even buy a couple more so I can have a little bit of a Stormtrooper squad going for my display, because I think he looks cool. Sometimes you don't need to spend a lot of money to just have fun with your Star Wars toys. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars toy and had a lot of fun checking out his details. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a Stormtrooper fan, I've also unboxed the Epic Hero Series 4-inch Stormtrooper figure. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole Star Wars collectibles playlist. This is the way.